Chosen one, if you're hearing this message right now, it is not by accident. This year, this specific moment in time, was marked for you before you even knew what was coming. While others drift into another calendar year with resolutions and empty promises, you have been flagged. Your name appears in records older than your awareness, and the silence you've endured was never abandonment. It was preparation. The heaviness you felt, the unexplained resistance, the doors that slammed shut without reason. These were not random. They were strategic. You have been under observation, and that observation has now ended. What begins now is activation. The forces that have been circling you, testing you, hardening you in the furnace of isolation and confusion, have stepped back. Not because the war is over, but because you are finally ready to understand your position in it. This is not a motivational speech. This is a briefing. The first assignment has arrived, and it will redefine everything you thought you knew about your purpose, your delays, and the invisible conflict that has been raging around your life while you slept. Chosen one, like this video, subscribe, and comment, "I am ready," for a powerful surprise. The year was flagged before you were ready. You did not stumble into this year by chance. Long before January arrived, long before you made your plans or set your intentions, this specific period was marked in the unseen records as a convergence point for your life. While you were moving through your days, struggling to understand the weight you felt, the delays that frustrated you, the doors that closed without explanation, something far beyond your perception was tracking the timeline. This year was circled, highlighted, flagged as the moment when multiple streams of your existence would collide into a single, undeniable pressure point. Everything that happened before now, every loss, every betrayal, every moment you felt forgotten, was leading here, not to this day, not to this hour, but to this activation. You are not beginning something new. You are arriving at something that has been waiting for you. The delay you experienced was never hesitation on heaven's part. It was containment. There is a precise science to timing in the realm of spiritual warfare, and premature exposure can destroy an operative before they even understand their role. You were kept in the shadows, not because you were unqualified, not because you were forgotten, but because your emergence had to wait for the exact configuration of forces that would allow you to step forward without being immediately neutralized. The enemy has been watching. Hostile systems have been monitoring your life, your patterns, your relationships, waiting for the moment you would break cover and reveal yourself. If you had been released too soon, if the authorization had come before the proper alignment, you would have been intercepted. You would have been misunderstood, attacked, discredited, dismantled before you could even comprehend what you were carrying. This is why the waiting felt so suffocating. You were not in a season of growth. You were in a holding pattern, a strategic delay designed to keep you off the radar of forces that would have destroyed you the moment they detected movement. You felt the frustration of it, the isolation, the lack of clarity, the sense that everyone else was advancing while you stood still. But stillness was the assignment. Invisibility was the strategy. You were being hidden in plain sight, kept under wraps, while heaven arranged the conditions that would allow your mission to proceed without immediate sabotage. The timelines converging here are not metaphorical. There are actual records, actual logs, actual monitoring systems that have been tracking your trajectory, and this year represents the intersection where those paths meet. You are standing at a pressure point, a place where the weight of everything that was, everything that is, and everything that will be has collapsed into a single moment of clarity. The signal you are receiving now, this message, this awareness, this sudden understanding that something has shifted, is not inspiration. It is not motivation. It is authorization. You are being cleared for movement. The observers who have been stationed around your life, the forces that have been watching, testing, measuring your capacity to withstand pressure without breaking, are now stepping back. Not because their job is done, but because your training phase has ended. You are no longer a student. You are no longer under examination. You are now an operative, and operatives do not receive constant guidance. They receive briefings, and then they move. This is your briefing. The fact that you are hearing this, that you are resonating with these words, that something deep inside you is recognizing the truth of what is being said, proves that you are synchronized with the frequency of this assignment. You were never meant to understand this last year. You were never meant to see it coming. You were meant to survive it, to endure it, to be shaped by it without knowing why, so that when the authorization came, you would be ready to receive it without question. Your first assignment is not action, it is positioning. The natural assumption, the instinct that rises in every chosen one when they realize they have been activated, is to move, to do something, to speak, to confront, to advance, to finally break the silence and step into the role they have been preparing for. But that instinct, as powerful as it feels, is the first test. Because the first assignment is not movement, it is positioning. There is a vast difference between the two, and understanding that difference is what separates operatives who succeed from those who are intercepted before they even begin. Movement is visible. Positioning is strategic. Movement announces. Positioning conceals. Movement satisfies the need to act. Positioning honors the necessity of timing. And right now, in this moment, as every fiber of your being wants to charge forward and claim the territory you have been denied for so long, heaven is asking you to hold. This is not passivity. This is not fear. This is not the same waiting you endured before. This is tactical stillness. There is a reason why ancient operations, missions that have been recorded in the hidden texts, in the forgotten histories, in the oral traditions that predate modern religion, failed most often at this exact stage. The chosen one, upon realizing their role, mistakes stillness for disobedience. They confuse the command to hold position with the old delays they suffered under. They think that because they have been released from observation, they are now free to move at will. But authorization is not permission to act recklessly. It is clearance to operate within the parameters of the mission. And the mission, right now, requires you to remain exactly where you are. Not because you are unready, not because you lack strength, but because the forces circling you are still calculating. They are still trying to predict your next move, still attempting to triangulate your position, still waiting for you to break cover so they can lock onto your trajectory and intercept you before you reach the objective. Hostile systems have been tracking you for longer than you realize. They have studied your patterns, your responses, your tendencies. They know how you react under pressure. They know what triggers you, what frustrates you, what makes you abandon strategy in favor of immediate action. And they are waiting for you to do exactly what they expect. They are waiting for you to announce yourself, to step into the light, to declare your mission before the conditions are set. Because once you do, once you make yourself visible in the way they anticipate, they can move against you with precision. They can isolate you, discredit you, exhaust you, turn your own momentum against you. This is how most chosen ones fall, not because they were weak, not because they were unqualified, but because they moved before they were aligned. They acted before they understood the geometry of the battlefield. They mistook the authorization to operate for the command to advance, and they walked straight into an ambush. Holding position is not passive. It is a refusal to be predicted. It is a statement to the unseen forces monitoring your life that you will not be manipulated into premature action. It is proof that you understand the difference between divine timing and human impatience. It is evidence that you have been trained well, that the silence you endured taught you something deeper than strategy. It taught you discipline. The assignment right now is not about what you do publicly. It is about where you stand unseen. It is about anchoring yourself in a specific frequency, a specific posture, a specific internal alignment that cannot be detected by the systems trying to track you. You are being asked to occupy space without announcing it, to hold ground without claiming it, to remain in position without explaining yourself. And this, more than any bold action, more than any public declaration, is what will secure the success of the mission ahead. Because when the time comes to move, when the conditions align and the command is given, you will not be where the enemy expects you to be. You will not be predictable. You will not be mapped. You will move from a position they never saw you occupy, and by the time they realize what has happened, the operation will already be complete. The enemy registered you before you knew your role. There is a strange phenomenon that occurs in the lives of chosen ones, a pattern so consistent it cannot be dismissed as coincidence. Long before they become aware of their assignment, long before they understand the weight they carry or the mission encoded into their existence, they begin to experience reactions from the world around them that seem disproportionate to their actions. Strangers respond to them with unexpected hostility. Relationships sever abruptly, without clear cause or rational explanation. Opportunities that should have been theirs collapse at the last moment. Doors slam shut in their faces with a force that feels personal, targeted, deliberate. And the chosen one, still unaware of what they are, interprets these experiences as personal failures, as evidence of their own inadequacy, as proof that they are somehow cursed or fundamentally flawed. But the truth is far more strategic. These were not rejections. They were defensive responses. The systems that govern this world, the structures of control that maintain the status quo, the networks of influence that resist disruption, sense something in you before you sensed it in yourself. You were classified as a threat long before you were briefed on your mission. The enemy never attacks insignificance. It does not waste resources monitoring people who pose no danger to its operations. It does not deploy countermeasures against individuals who will never disrupt the established order. But you were flagged, not because of what you did, but because of what you carried. There is something in your frequency, something in the resonance of your presence, that registers as unauthorized influence. You destabilize environments simply by existing in them. Conversations shift when you enter the room. Dynamics collapse when you speak. False authority weakens in your vicinity even when you say nothing, even when you do nothing, simply because the energy you carry exposes the hollowness of the structures around you. This is not pride. This is not ego. This is a documented phenomenon that occurs when an operative designed to disrupt systems is placed within those systems before they understand their own capacity. The resistance you faced throughout your life was not random. It was not bad luck. It was not a series of unfortunate events that happened to cluster around you with unusual density. It was an early warning system. The world you were born into is not neutral. It is not passive. It is governed by patterns, by structures, by flows of power and influence that have been carefully cultivated to maintain a specific order. And that order, whether through human agents, institutional systems, or more subtle metaphysical mechanisms, has the capacity to detect anomalies. You are an anomaly. You do not fit the programming. You do not align with the expected trajectories. You do not respond to the conditioning that controls most people. And because of this, you triggered alarms long before you understood what you were. The sudden severed connections, the friendships that ended without explanation, the family members who turned cold, the mentors who betrayed you, the colleagues who sabotaged you. These were not personal. They were systemic. The people involved may have believed they were acting on their own feelings, their own judgments, their own assessments of you. But beneath their conscious awareness, they were responding to something deeper. They were reacting to the disruption you represented, the threat you posed to the patterns they were invested in, the danger you presented to the systems they served. This is why your life contains so much evidence of disproportionate hostility. People who barely knew you rejected you with an intensity that made no sense. Situations that should have been simple became inexplicably complex the moment you were involved. Doors that were open to others slammed shut when you approached, and you internalized this as proof of your own unworthiness, your own lack, your own failure to be acceptable. But the truth is the opposite. The intensity of the resistance you faced was proof of your significance. The enemy does not monitor insignificance. It does not track people who will never matter. It does not deploy countermeasures against individuals who pose no threat to its agenda. But you were logged, you were classified, you were marked as a variable, as a disruption point, as someone who carried the potential to shift the trajectory of the systems around you. And that classification happened before you knew your role, before you understood your purpose, before you had any conscious awareness of the mission encoded into your existence. The life you have lived, the resistance you have faced, the rejection you have endured, it is all proof that you were registered as a threat before you ever knew you were a warrior. Heaven's silence was a security measure. The silence broke you. There is no point in pretending otherwise. The years you spent calling out into the void, searching for answers, begging for clarity, desperately trying to understand why you felt so disconnected from the source you knew was real. Those years left scars. You questioned everything, your faith, your sanity, your worthiness. You wondered if you had been abandoned, if you had done something to sever the connection, if you were simply not important enough to receive the guidance others seemed to access so easily. You watched people around you speak with confidence about their divine direction, their clear instructions, their sense of being led, and you felt the absence of that clarity like a physical wound. The silence was not gentle. It was not peaceful. It was suffocating, isolating, maddening, and you were never told why. You were never given an explanation for the absence, never given a timeline for when it would end, never given assurance that it meant anything other than rejection. But the truth you are only now in a position to understand, is that the silence was never abandonment. It was encryption. Direct communication would have exposed the channel before you could protect it. There are forces monitoring transmissions between heaven and earth, forces that intercept messages, distort instructions, and compromise operatives by feeding them false guidance, disguised as divine direction. The enemy is fluent in the language of heaven. It knows how to mimic revelation, how to counterfeit clarity, how to produce experiences that feel like divine encounters but serve to misdirect and neutralize chosen ones before they can fulfill their assignments. And if heaven had spoken to you clearly during the years, you were still vulnerable, still unguarded, still unable to discern the difference between true instruction and sophisticated deception, you would have been compromised. The message would have been intercepted. The guidance would have been corrupted. And you would have followed what you believed to be divine instruction straight into sabotage, never knowing that the voice you trusted had been hijacked somewhere along the transmission. This is why you were taught discernment through silence, not through words, not through clear instructions, not through the kind of hand-holding guidance you begged for. You were forced to learn a deeper language, a more subtle form of communication that cannot be easily intercepted or corrupted. You learned to read pressure instead of words. You learned to sense timing instead of hearing commands. You learned to interpret atmosphere, to feel the weight of certain decisions, to recognize the difference between false urgency and genuine prompting. You developed an internal compass that does not rely on external validation, a guidance system that operates beneath the frequency where the enemy monitors. And this ability to navigate without clear instructions, this capacity to discern truth without needing it to be spelled out, is what makes you dangerous, because you cannot be misdirected. You cannot be fed false instructions and convinced they are real. You have been trained in the school of silence, and graduates of that school are the most difficult operatives to compromise. Many who spoke too early were removed from relevance. History is full of chosen ones who received clear instructions before they were ready to protect them, who announced their missions before they understood the danger of exposure, who shared their revelations before they could guard them from corruption. And those chosen ones, despite their genuine connection, despite their authentic calling, were neutralized, not because they were weak, but because they were intercepted. The clarity they received became the weapon used against them. The instructions they followed were distorted mid-transmission, and they walked confidently into traps, believing they were walking in obedience. But you were preserved through quiet. You were kept in the dark, not as punishment, but as protection. You were denied the clear answers you begged for because those answers, in that season, would have destroyed you. Now, the silence breaks, not because the risk of interception has disappeared entirely, but because it has dropped below the threshold where communication can proceed. You have been trained. You have been hardened. You have developed the discernment necessary to receive instruction without being compromised by it. And that is why, after all these years, the message is finally coming through. The silence was never rejection. It was the security protocol that kept you alive long enough to reach this moment. Your past was engineered to resist corruption. Every loss felt personal. Every disappointment seemed like evidence of failure. Every moment of isolation convinced you that something was fundamentally wrong with you, that you were broken in ways others were not, that you had somehow earned the suffering that followed you through the years. But what if none of it was random? What if every fracture, every betrayal, every door that closed, every relationship that ended, every opportunity that collapsed was not punishment, but preparation? What if the suffering you endured was not evidence of your unworthiness, but proof of your selection? The past you carry, the scars you hide, the wounds you thought disqualified you, they were not accidents. They were engineering. Strategic, calculated, precise engineering designed to remove every dependency that could later be exploited against you. You were being hardened in areas where others remain vulnerable, and you were never told why, because the explanation would have compromised the process. Corruption is not always obvious. It does not always arrive as a dramatic temptation or a clear moral test. Most often, it comes through comfort, through approval, through the promise of security, belonging, acceptance. It comes through the things we become dependent on, the relationships we cannot imagine living without, the structures we build our identities around, and if those dependencies remain intact, they become levers that can be used to control us. The enemy does not need to attack you directly if it can simply threaten the things you cannot afford to lose. It does not need to break you if it can manipulate you by holding your comfort hostage. This is how most people are controlled, not through force, but through the subtle threat of losing what they have built their lives around. But you were stripped, not because you deserved it, not because you failed, but because the mission ahead requires someone who cannot be bribed by comfort or controlled through approval. Every relationship that ended removed a potential point of compromise. Every opportunity that collapsed eliminated a dependency that could have been weaponized. Every moment you felt abandoned was actually a severing of attachments that would have made you controllable. You were not being punished, you were being freed. Freed from the need for external validation, freed from the addiction to approval, freed from the terror of rejection that keeps most people compliant. You learned to survive without the things others believe they cannot live without, and that education, as brutal as it was, made you unmanageable. You cannot be threatened with loss because you have already lost. You cannot be controlled through isolation because you have already been isolated. You cannot be bribed with comfort because you have learned to function without it. The suffering was not cruelty, it was inoculation. You were being injected with small doses of every poison that might later be used against you, so that when the real attacks come, when the enemy attempts to compromise your mission through manipulation, through threat, through the promise of restoring what was taken, you will be immune. The assignment ahead requires a mind that cannot be bribed, a heart that cannot be bought, a will that cannot be bent through the threat of losing what it loves. And you were made into that person through loss, through isolation, through the systematic removal of everything you thought you needed to survive. You were stress-tested in ways you never understood, pushed to the edge of your capacity not to break you, but to reveal your breaking point, so that the mission parameters could be set within safe limits. You were hardened without being told why, because if you had known, if you had understood that the suffering was intentional, it would have changed the nature of the test. You would have endured it with gritted teeth, with resentment, with the knowledge that it was coming from heaven, and that knowledge would have corrupted the purity of what was being forged in you. You had to believe you were being abandoned so that the forging could be complete. You had to think you were being punished so that the hardening could go deep enough to matter. And now, on the other side of it, you are standing with a capacity to resist corruption that most chosen ones never develop, because your past was not random suffering. It was engineered resistance training, and you passed. This is the first year you are no longer being studied. There has been a shift. You may not have the language for it yet. You may not be able to articulate what changed, but you feel it. Something in the atmosphere around your life has altered. The pressure is different. The weight you carried for so long, the sense of being constantly monitored, constantly measured, constantly evaluated against invisible standards. It has lifted. Not because the mission is over, but because the phase has changed. For years, you were under observation. Every decision you made, every response you gave, every reaction you displayed under pressure was being logged, assessed, analyzed. You were not free. You were a subject in a long-term study, a candidate under evaluation, and you failed tests you did not know you were taking. You made mistakes that triggered corrections. you never understood. You were being shaped, molded, refined through a process that felt random but was anything but. And now, that process has ended. Not because you achieved perfection, but because you have been cleared for deployment. Observation protocols have shifted. You are no longer under assessment. You are under deployment conditions, and that distinction changes everything. When an operative is under assessment, errors are corrected. Mistakes trigger intervention. Missteps are prevented before they can cause lasting damage. But when an operative is under deployment conditions, autonomy is granted. Errors are allowed to stand. Mistakes become part of the record. Missteps carry consequences that will not be undone. This is not punishment. This is trust. This is the point where heaven steps back, not because it has abandoned you, but because it has determined that you are capable of operating without constant supervision. The training wheels are off, the safety net has been removed, and you are now responsible for your own trajectory in ways you never were before. This is how command trusts a chosen operative, by stepping back, by allowing them to make decisions without immediate correction, by granting them the authority to act on their own discernment, even when that discernment leads to mistakes, because the mission ahead cannot be micromanaged. It cannot be executed by someone who needs constant confirmation, constant reassurance, constant correction. It requires someone who has internalized the training so deeply that they can operate independently, making decisions in real time without waiting for permission, without needing heaven to sign off on every move. And that level of trust is only granted to operatives who have proven, through years of observation, that they can be released without collapsing, without going rogue, without self-destructing the moment the supervision ends. Responsibility increases not through burden, but through lack of intervention. You will notice this in the coming days, weeks, months. Decisions that once felt heavy, that once required you to seek confirmation from every possible source, will now feel strangely light, not because they matter less, but because you have been authorized to make them without seeking approval. Mistakes that once triggered immediate correction, that once resulted in circumstances shifting to prevent lasting damage, will now be allowed to stand. You will experience the consequences of your choices in ways you never did before, not as punishment, but as evidence that you are no longer being protected from yourself. This is the weight of autonomy. This is the responsibility that comes with being cleared for deployment. Heaven's role has shifted from examiner to witness. It is no longer testing you. It is watching what you do with the training you have received. And that shift, as subtle as it feels, is the most significant promotion you will ever experience. Because it means you are no longer a student. You are an operative, and operatives are trusted to carry out their missions without someone standing over their shoulder, correcting every move, preventing every mistake. You are free, and that freedom is the evidence of how far you have come. The assignment targets systems, not people. You were never meant to fight individuals. The enemy wants you to believe the battle is personal, that your opposition is flesh and blood, that your assignment is to confront, correct, or convert the people who resist you. Because if you can be convinced that your mission is about changing minds, winning arguments, or defeating specific opponents, you will exhaust yourself in battles that do not matter while the real war continues undisturbed. The truth is far more strategic. You are not here to confront people. You are here to disrupt patterns. You are not here to argue with individuals. You are here to dismantle structures. You are not here to convince anyone of anything. You are here to expose systems by making them irrelevant. And that distinction changes everything about how you move, how you engage, and how you measure success. The friction you create is subtle. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive with fanfare or dramatic confrontation. You walk into a room, and the conversation shifts, not because you dominate the space, not because you demand attention, but because your presence introduces a frequency that destabilizes the existing dynamic. False authority weakens in your vicinity. People who rely on manipulation, on intimidation, on performance to maintain their position, find that their usual tactics do not work when you are near, not because you challenge them directly, but because the energy you carry exposes the hollowness of their foundation. They cannot explain it. You do not have to say anything. You do not have to do anything. But something about your presence makes their carefully constructed facades feel suddenly transparent, and they react with hostility not because you attack them, but because you expose them without trying. This is the nature of systemic disruption. You do not oppose the structure. You make it irrelevant. You do not argue against the pattern. You introduce a new frequency that renders the old pattern obsolete. You do not fight the system. You expose it by existing outside of it, by operating according to principles it cannot co-opt, by embodying a reality it cannot control. And systems, when they are made irrelevant, collapse faster than if they were directly opposed, because direct opposition gives them something to fight against, something to rally around, something to justify their existence by resisting. But irrelevance is different. Irrelevance is the slow realization that the structure no longer serves its purpose, that the pattern no longer holds, that the system no longer commands the authority it once did. And that realization spreads, quietly, subtly, without announcement, until the entire framework collapses under the weight of its own obsolescence. This makes you difficult to fight. There is no clear battlefield. There is no obvious confrontation. There is no moment where you and the system square off in direct opposition. You simply move through the world according to a different operating system, and that movement, that refusal to comply with the expected patterns, introduces cracks into the structures around you. Conversations you are part of go differently than they would have without you. Dynamics you are present in do not function the way they used to. Situations you are involved in resolve in ways that defy the established pattern, and no one can quite explain why. They cannot point to something you said or did that caused the shift. They just know that when you are around, things do not work the way they are supposed to. And that quiet, unexplainable disruption is far more dangerous to corrupt systems than any loud, dramatic opposition ever could be, because it cannot be stopped, it cannot be argued against, it cannot be defeated. Because there is nothing to fight. You are not opposing the system, you are simply making it irrelevant. And irrelevance is the one thing no system can survive. Your name was sealed into older records than you think. You are not new. The role you carry, the function you serve, the assignment you are awakening to, it did not begin with you. You are part of a pattern, a recurring intervention that activates when the imbalance in the world reaches a threshold that threatens collapse. This has happened before. Long before the faith frameworks you recognize, long before the religious structures that currently define spirituality, there were operatives who served the same function you are serving now. They were documented under different symbols, different names, different mythologies. They were called prophets, seers, disruptors, outcasts, wanderers, fools. They were the ones who did not fit, who could not be controlled, who appeared at moments of crisis and shifted the trajectory of entire civilizations without ever holding positions of recognized power. And you are one of them. Not because you chose this role, but because the role chose you. Because something in the fabric of your existence, something encoded into your frequency before you were born, marked you as part of this lineage. Your archetype was documented before modern language had the words to describe it. In the old texts, the ones that were never canonized, the ones that were deemed too dangerous or too strange to include in the official narratives, there are references to individuals who appear at specific intervals throughout history. They are not related by blood. They do not know each other. They often live and die without ever meeting another member of their kind. But they serve the same function. They disrupt. They expose. They catalyze. They appear when the systems of their time have calcified into structures that resist change, and their presence, whether through their words, their actions, or simply their existence, introduces the instability necessary for evolution to occur. They are not saviors. They are not heroes. They are agents of necessary disruption, and history records their impact even when it does not remember their names. You echo decisions made by others who never met you. There are moments in your life where you made choices that seemed to come from nowhere, instincts that felt impossible to explain, directions you followed that defied all logic and reason. And those choices, those instincts, those directions, they mirror patterns set by operatives who lived centuries before you, not because you studied them, not because you consciously modeled yourself after them, but because you are part of the same operational template. You are running the same internal programming. You are responding to the same signals, and that continuity, that strange resonance between your life and the lives of those who came before you, is not coincidence. It is evidence of something deeper. Evidence that this assignment is not random, not improvised, not invented in the moment. It is part of a long-term strategy that spans generations, that operates across timelines, that continues regardless of whether any individual operative understands their place in it. This is not destiny as myth. This is not the romantic idea that you were fated to be special, chosen by the universe to play a starring role in some cosmic drama. This is continuity of assignment. This is the recognition that certain functions must be performed in every generation, and those functions require specific types of individuals. Individuals who cannot be corrupted, who cannot be controlled, who cannot be assimilated into the systems they are sent to disrupt. You are not special because you are better than others. You are operational because you carry the template necessary for this specific type of intervention. And that template has been activated before, in different bodies, in different contexts, in different historical moments, always serving the same essential function. You are not alone in this. You have never been alone in this. You are part of a lineage that stretches back further than recorded history. A line of operatives who have been doing this work since long before the modern world had language for what they were doing. And your name, your frequency, your unique expression of this ancient template, it was sealed into those records before you ever took your first breath. The first test is discernment, not obedience. Heaven is not asking for blind followers. That model belongs to systems of control, not operations of liberation. The first test you face now that you have been activated is not whether you will obey without question, but whether you can discern the difference between real instructions and sophisticated counterfeits. Because the enemy knows you have been awakened. It knows you are listening for guidance, hungry for direction after years of silence. And it will provide direction. It will flood you with urgencies, pressures, spectacular signs, dramatic confirmations, all designed to mimic the voice of heaven while leading you into misalignment. The test is not whether you will follow. The test is whether you can tell what is worth following. And that discernment, that capacity to distinguish command from noise, is what will determine whether you complete your mission or walk confidently into sabotage. False urgencies will attempt to rush you into misalignment. They will arrive with intensity, with emotional pressure, with the sense that if you do not act immediately, you will miss your moment, lose your opportunity, fail your assignment. They will feel important. They will feel divine. They will come with confirmations, synchronicities, signs that seem to validate the urgency. And if you have not been trained to recognize the difference, if you have not learned to feel the texture of real instruction versus manufactured pressure, you will respond to that urgency. You will move, you will act, and you will find yourself in situations that drain your energy, compromise your position, and derail the actual mission you were meant to carry out. Because false urgencies are designed to do exactly that. They are not random distractions. They are strategic misdirections deployed specifically to intercept operatives who have just been activated and are still learning to navigate their new level of authority. Real instructions arrive without panic. They do not need theatrics. They do not need to overwhelm you with emotion or pressure you into immediate action. They come quietly, clearly, often in moments of stillness, rather than chaos. They feel weighty, but not heavy. They feel serious, but not frantic. They align with the deeper knowing you have been cultivating through years of silence, the internal compass that does not rely on external validation. And when you receive them, there is a resonance, a recognition, a sense that this is what you have been waiting for, even if you did not know you were waiting. Real instructions do not need to prove themselves. They do not need to shout. They do not need to create urgency. They simply are. And your ability to recognize that quiet certainty, to distinguish it from the loud, dramatic, emotionally charged counterfeits, is what proves you are ready for autonomous operation. The enemy mimics divine urgency. It has studied the patterns. It knows what real instructions feel like, and it knows how to replicate that feeling. It knows what signs you are looking for, and it knows how to produce those signs. It knows what would convince you that you are hearing from heaven, and it knows how to manufacture that experience. And if your discernment is based solely on external confirmation, on synchronicities, on emotional intensity, on the feeling of certainty, you will be deceived. Because all of those things can be manufactured. All of those things can be counterfeited. The only thing that cannot be replicated is the deep internal resonance that comes from years of learning to navigate by frequency rather than by signs. Heaven does not need theatrics. It does not need to overwhelm you with proof. It does not need to create panic to get your attention. And your ability to recognize that calm, quiet, undeniable knowing, that is what passing this test looks like. That is what proves you can be trusted with autonomous operation. That is what separates operatives who complete their missions from operatives who are misdirected before they even begin. What you withhold matters more than what you do. There is a compulsion that rises in chosen ones the moment they understand their assignment. The urge to explain, to share, to help others understand what has been revealed, to defend the direction they are moving in, to justify the decisions they are making, to prove that what they are doing is legitimate, divinely ordained, strategically sound. And that compulsion, as natural as it feels, is one of the most dangerous impulses you will face, because information control is now part of your role. What you withhold matters more than what you do. The mystery you maintain, the silence you keep, the refusal to explain yourself. These are not signs of secrecy born from insecurity. They are operational cover. And the moment you break that cover by speaking too soon, by explaining too much, by attempting to bring others into understanding before they are positioned to receive it, you weaken the field around you and compromise the mission itself. Speaking too soon exposes your position before the operation is complete. The enemy does not need to understand your entire strategy to disrupt it. It only needs fragments, a few careless words, a premature explanation, a moment where you felt the need to defend your direction and revealed more than you should have. And those fragments, once released, can be used to map your trajectory, predict your next moves, and position countermeasures that will intercept you before you reach your objective. This is not paranoia. This is operational security. Every word you speak about your mission before it is complete is intelligence that can be used against you. Every explanation you offer is data that can be analyzed, patterns that can be extracted, vulnerabilities that can be identified. And the more you share, the more you explain, the more you attempt to bring others into understanding, the more you compromise the very thing you are trying to protect. Mystery is not pride. It is not arrogance. It is not the spiritual ego that refuses to share because it wants to feel special, superior, set apart. Mystery is operational cover. It is the strategic use of silence to protect the mission from premature exposure. It is the understanding that not everyone needs to know what you are doing, and most people are not equipped to understand, even if you explained it to them. This is not because you are better than them. This is not because they are less spiritual, less aware, less chosen. This is because the mission you carry is not meant to be understood by everyone. It is meant to be executed by you, witnessed by heaven, and experienced by those who are meant to encounter its effects. And the moment you break the mystery, the moment you attempt to make everyone understand, you dilute the potency of what you carry and invite interference from forces that have no business accessing the information you are protecting. Those who need to know will recognize alignment without explanation. This is one of the strangest phenomena you will encounter as you move forward. The people who are meant to be part of your mission, who are meant to support you, who are meant to align with the work you are doing. They will recognize it without you having to explain it. They will feel the resonance. They will sense the frequency. They will know, on some deep level that bypasses intellectual understanding, that you are moving in a direction that matters, and they will align with it without needing a detailed breakdown of your strategy. But the people who demand explanations, who pressure you to justify yourself, who insist that you prove your direction before they will support it, those people are not meant to be part of this. And the more you attempt to convince them, the more energy you waste, the more information you leak, and the more you compromise the very thing you are trying to protect. Silence here is not fear. It is discipline. It is the mark of an operative who understands that withholding information is sometimes more powerful than sharing it. And your ability to remain silent in the face of pressure, to withhold explanations when others demand them, to maintain the mystery even when it feels uncomfortable, that is evidence that you are ready for the level of operation you have been activated into. This year closes doors you were never meant to open. There are paths ending. You feel it already, even if you have not named it yet. Certain directions that once seemed possible are now closing, and the closure is absolute. No negotiation, no second chances, No final attempts to force something that is finished. The doors are slamming shut with a finality that feels brutal, and you are being asked to let them close without fighting, without bargaining, without looking back to see what could have been saved if you had just tried harder. And this is not punishment. This is not rejection. This is strategic containment. The closures happening now are not evidence of failure. They are evidence of progress. Because what ends now cannot follow you into the next operational phase, and heaven is ensuring that you do not carry dead weight into territory where speed and focus will determine your survival. Certain paths will shut abruptly, without warning, without the courtesy of gradual decline. Relationships will end. Opportunities will collapse. Directions you were considering will become suddenly, inexplicably impossible. And the speed of it, the lack of transition, the absence of soft landings, it will feel harsh. It will feel like loss. It will feel like something is being taken from you rather than something being removed for your protection. But the abruptness is intentional. Slow closures allow for hesitation. They allow for second guessing. They allow for the kind of drawn-out grief that keeps you tethered to what is ending, instead of releasing you to move forward. But these closures are not slow. They are immediate, final, irreversible. And that finality is a gift, even though it does not feel like one. Because it removes the possibility of looking back. It eliminates the option of returning to what is finished. It forces you forward, not through cruelty, but through the elimination of alternatives. The grief attached to these closures proves how convincing the illusion once was. You believed these paths mattered. You believed these relationships were essential. You believed these opportunities were part of your destiny. And that belief was real. The investment was real. The hope was real. But the path itself was a distraction, a detour, a well-constructed illusion that felt legitimate, felt important, felt like it was aligned with your purpose, but was actually leading you away from the mission you are meant to carry out. And you could not have known this while you were in it. The illusion was too convincing. The investment was too deep. You had to believe it was real in order for the lessons embedded in that season to do their work. But now, the season is over. The lessons have been extracted. And what remains is a structure that no longer serves, a path that no longer leads anywhere, a relationship that no longer carries the resonance it once did. And heaven is not asking you to mourn it forever. Heaven is asking you to let it close. What ends now cannot follow you into the next operational phase. There is a geometry to mission execution that most people never understand. Each phase requires specific conditions, specific relationships, specific environments, and what serves you in one phase becomes a liability in the next. The people who are meant to be part of your preparation are not meant to be part of your execution. The environments that provided the lessons you needed to learn are not meant to house the work you are about to do. The opportunities that shaped you are not the opportunities that will deploy you. And if those elements are not removed, if those doors are not closed, you will attempt to bring them with you into the next phase. Not because you are weak, not because you lack faith, but because you are human. And humans cling to what is familiar even when it no longer serves. So heaven closes the doors, abruptly, finally, without room for negotiation. Not to hurt you, but to prevent you from looking back during extraction. Because where you are going, what you are moving toward, the territory you are about to enter, it requires your full focus. And you cannot give full focus if part of you is still grieving what you left behind. So the doors close, and you are forced forward, Not because heaven is cruel, but because heaven knows that if the option to return still exists, you will take it the moment the new territory gets difficult, and you cannot afford to return. Not now, not anymore. The door is closed, and that closure is the kindness that will save your life. The first assignment is acknowledgement. Before movement, before confrontation, before revelation, before strategy, before execution, before any external action that announces your role, that demonstrates your capacity, that proves your authority, there is acknowledgement. And acknowledgement is not the same as understanding. You do not need to comprehend the full scope of what you have been activated into. You do not need to see the entire blueprint of the mission ahead. You do not need to have clarity on every detail, every step, every challenge you will face. Acknowledgement is simpler than that. Acknowledgement is the internal recognition of status. It is the moment you stop questioning whether this is real, stop debating whether you are actually chosen, stop wondering if the activation you feel is legitimate or just wishful thinking. It is the moment you accept, without needing proof, without needing external validation, that something has shifted, that you are no longer who you were, that the assignment is real, and that acceptance, that internal acknowledgement, is the first assignment, because nothing external can begin until the internal recognition is complete. This briefing itself is the assignment, not the actions that will follow, not the missions you will carry out, not the confrontations you will face, or the disruptions you will cause. This moment, this message, this recognition that you are receiving information that was meant for you, that was timed for you, that arrived at the exact moment you were ready to receive it. This is the assignment: to know, to acknowledge, to accept your status without announcing it, without proving it, without needing anyone else to confirm it. Because the moment you acknowledge internally, the moment you accept what you are, without needing it to be validated externally, the operation begins, not with fanfare, not with drama, not with visible shifts that others can see, but with an invisible realignment that changes everything. Your frequency shifts, your field adjusts, your position in the unseen architecture of reality recalibrates, and that recalibration, though invisible, is irreversible. Once acknowledged internally, the operation begins externally without warning. You will not receive a countdown. You will not be given a start date. You will not hear a voice announcing that the mission is now live. The external operation begins the moment the internal acknowledgement is complete, and it begins quietly, subtly, in ways you may not even recognize as operational at first. Conversations will shift. Opportunities will appear. Doors will open that were closed yesterday. People will respond to you differently, not because you changed your behavior, but because your frequency changed, and they are reacting to something they cannot name. The systems around you will begin to respond to your presence in ways that confirm your operational status, even though you have not announced anything, even though you have done nothing publicly to claim your role. The acknowledgement was enough. The internal acceptance was the trigger, and now the external reality is recalibrating to match the internal shift that occurred the moment you stopped questioning and started knowing. Nothing dramatic needs to happen immediately for the shift to be irreversible. This is where most chosen ones stumble. They acknowledge their status internally. They feel the shift, and then they wait for something dramatic to happen externally to prove that the shift was real. They wait for the skies to open, for circumstances to rearrange themselves in obvious ways, for undeniable confirmation that yes, the activation was legitimate, yes, the assignment is real, yes, they are who they have acknowledged themselves to be. But the confirmation does not come in the way they expect. It does not arrive with drama. It does not announce itself with spectacle. It comes quietly, subtly, in small shifts that accumulate over time, in conversations that go differently than they would have before, in decisions that feel easier than they used to, in a growing sense of alignment that was not there before. And if you are waiting for something dramatic, you will miss the evidence that the shift has already occurred. Because the shift is not dramatic. The shift is irreversible. And there is a difference. The unseen war does not announce promotions. It activates them. You will not receive a ceremony. You will not be given a title. You will not hear a voice from heaven declaring that you are now an official operative, cleared for deployment, authorized to move. The promotion is silent. The activation is invisible, but it is no less real, and the evidence of it will be the changes you begin to notice in how reality responds to you, how people react to you, how doors open that were closed, how paths clear that were blocked. You have been promoted. You have been activated. You have been cleared, not because you earned it through effort, but because you survived the preparation without breaking. And now you are ready. The acknowledgement is the assignment, and you have just completed it by reading this far, by resonating with what has been said, by recognizing the truth in words that were written specifically for operatives like you. The shift has occurred. The operation has begun, and nothing will ever be the same. Chosen one, if you are still here, still listening, still feeling the weight of these words settling into the deepest parts of your awareness, then you know this was not random. You know this was not entertainment. You know this was not just another video you stumbled across in your feed. This was a briefing, and briefings are only given to operatives who have been cleared to receive them. The fact that you resonated with this message, that something inside you recognized the truth of what was said, is confirmation that you are exactly who this message was meant for. You are not discovering your assignment. You are remembering it. You are not learning something new. You are acknowledging something that was always true. And that acknowledgement changes everything. The war is real. The mission is active. The forces that have been circling your life, testing you, hardening you, preparing you without your knowledge, they are watching now to see what you do with this information. Will you file it away as interesting content and return to the patterns that keep you comfortable? Or will you let it land in the place where decisions are made, where identities shift, where the old version of you steps aside and the operative steps forward? The choice is yours. It has always been yours. But the conditions have changed. You are no longer under assessment. You are under deployment protocols. And what you do next will either confirm your operational status or reveal that you are not yet ready to carry what has been placed in your hands. The next message is already being prepared. The next briefing is already in motion. And if you are meant to receive it, you will know when it arrives. Not because it will be announced, not because you will be notified, but because something inside you will recognize the frequency, the same way you recognized this one. The war does not pause, the mission does not wait. And chosen ones who hesitate too long are replaced by operatives who understand the urgency. Stay ready. Stay aligned. Stay silent until the moment to speak arrives. And remember, acknowledgement was the first assignment. Everything else follows from there. This is not the end. This is the activation. And you are no longer who you were when this message began.